Hey everybody, this is Nicole Pascal with Topaz. Thanks so much for joining me today. We have Greg Rostami, our featured Topaz trade show rep, online with us to talk to us about the new Remaster 3.2. Hey Greg.
Hi, Nicole. How you doing?
Good. All right. Well, let me tell you just a little bit about Remask to start off with. It is a very quick, very easy masking tool. Greg is going to show you all about it. And with 3.2, we just upgraded. It is actually 3 times as fast, which is amazing. It goes very, very fast even on really large images. And there's not so much refinement needed with 3.2. So less refining, and I think you'll find it to be something that you'll find valuable in your workflow. All right, so if you have any questions, you can type them into your questions module on the GoToWebinar panel. Ashley Robinson and myself will be answering those as quickly as we can, and then Greg will go over some questions at the end of the presentation as well. If you're having any trouble with your sound or your speakers or your screen, I'm sorry, you can usually log back off and log back on. That usually will solve it. Maybe just minimizing your screen and bringing it back up might solve the issue as well. So let me tell you a little bit about Greg. Greg, again, is our featured trade show rep. If you've been to shows where Topaz is there, you've most likely seen Greg. He's a great presenter and a Topaz expert, and we are happy to have him here with us. So, Greg, I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Nicole. Um, I don't know if people. Oh, there we go. Okay. There we go. I hope everybody can see my screen right now.
Yes.
Let's go ahead and get started. Nicole, thank you very much for the introduction. And one of the biggest questions that always comes up is, why do you want to mask, actually, in the first place? And what are all the different ways that people use masking? Masking is essentially the practice of being able to cut something out of its background. So in this case over here, if we want to separate her from the background, this is exactly what it would look like. The difficulties of masking has always been to be able to take even the most subtle details, like every little hair strand that's out there, and be able to maintain that when you separate it from the background. And some of the traditional tools in masking have always been very cumbersome, and so with Remask, we really want to revolutionize how quickly and what kind of a quality you're going to have when you mask objects out of their backgrounds. In this case, the background originally was kind of boring, so we can see we've done a sky replacement. Here's an example where she was photographed in front of just a wall. Doesn't really make sense. So here we've masked her out and we put her on the road, so it makes more sense for a motorcycle to be on the road. In this case here, it's one of my favorite examples. There's a monster growing out of the head of the bride, and it's just something that's in the background that doesn't really look nice. Whereas now, when we use Topaz Remask along with Topaz Lens Effects, you can see how we have now put the background out of focus. So originally, because it was in focus, it was calling attention to itself. But now we've got this interesting bokeh effect that's going to put it into the background. Now here's another example where we're using Topaz Remask along with one of our other Topaz products. In this case, it's Topaz Simplify. So by masking the man out of the background, we can now apply Topaz Simplify to the background to make it seem like you have this really beautiful artistic depth of field, almost like a painterly effect in the background. And oftentimes you want to just use Remask for artistic purposes. Like in this case here, we want to bring attention to the flowers and make the bride be black and white. So that's easy. Just by masking out the flowers, then you can apply a black and white effect to the background so the bride can be black and white. I use it in just about every way you can imagine. Sometimes I use it in a way where I can take a photograph, and by masking out the background, I'll, in this case, put actually the foreground through Topaz Simplify, so it makes it look like a drawing where you have the dark black lines and you got the simplistic shading over here. Makes it look like a sketch or a drawing. And then finally, one of the things that people usually don't think about when you think about masking is using masks as a silhouette. So again, I'll go back to the original image over here. In a future webinar, I'm going to talk about exactly how I did this image. So we started out just with a photograph of the cowboy against the hills and a boring sky. And here, after I masked out the cowboy and the hills, I've replaced the sky with one of the sky elements that I found from the Layer Cake collection. And it's a really wonderful way of incorporating any kind of sky and producing a silhouette, because this is a beautiful sunset that's very bright. So a traditional photograph would actually produce a silhouette. So essentially, we use it in a lot of different ways. Here's a webinar that we did yesterday where we had a stadium. This is actually the Staples Center here in Los Angeles, and a photograph in my hand. And by combining Topaz Remask along with Topaz Lens Effects, and even we threw in a little bit of Topaz Clean, you created this really wonderful miniature effect. So now, without any further ado, let's jump into Topaz Remask and show you what it's all about and how it works. Usually people ask, how do you actually get multiple layers into Photoshop? And what I'm going to do right now is open up both of the elements that I'm going to be using for this composition. First, we have flowers that are going to be in the background, and we're going to go to open again and choose what we want to have as the foreground, which is going to be this photograph of the girl. And in this case, just choose your move tool. There's a lot of different ways of doing it, but this is probably one of my favorite ways. Just choose your move tool here, and if you put your cursor on it, it'll tell you actually it's the move tool, which is V. You take the layer that you're on, and you simply want to drag and drop it. Now you notice how you can't actually drag and drop background layers? That's because the background layer actually is locked down. So in your layers palette, double-click on the layer, and it says you want to just create a new layer, and all you have to do right now is just hit OK. And that will now unlock your background layer. So now you can actually take that layer now and move it into the other image. Notice you drag and drop it onto the tab, and now I lit up on it over here, and you can see that now how we have taken that image and placed it right on top of the background here, just like that. So now if you look in the lower right-hand corner, you'll notice that there are two layers. There's a lot of different ways of doing this. This was just one of the many different ways of taking two separate images and making them into two separate layers here in Photoshop. And you can, again, turn those layers on and off. And the reason why I brought some flowers in the background is because we want to cut her out so we can place her on top of the flowers. So here we go. Select your top layer. Under Filter, pull down to Topaz Labs, Topaz Remask. All right, now by default, you're going to notice that Remask puts a green overlay across your entire image. Green is going to tell Topaz what you want to keep. Also, you'll notice that by default, the brush that you have selected is blue. In fact, as I zoom into here, okay, you can see that if I put my cursor on the blue brush, it says that it's called the compute brush. This is the part that the computer is going to work on, and it's the most difficult part of a composite, which is always the edges. In fact, that's what I'm doing here right now. Just with the mouse, I'm going to go over the edges. And one of the things that most people don't know about Topaz Remask is that as you are drawing, you can actually use the right and the left bracket keys while you're still drawing to make your brush size either smaller or larger. Now, what I'm doing right now is, as you notice, when I get to the areas that have a harsher transition or a harder cut, I make my brush size become a little bit smaller. And in the areas that we had around the hair, which you saw on the right-hand side of the image, the brush size was considerably larger so that we can take care of all these little frizzy hairs that are in that corner. Once you've done this very rough outline, next thing you want to do is grab the red bucket fill. And I'm going to zoom in on here just so you can see what it says about that red bucket fill. It says that that's the flood fill to cut. Okay? Red tells Topaz Remask what you want to throw away, or what's the background, or what you want to cut out. So at this point, we've now created a tri-map. A tri-map is essentially comes from the number 3 for tri, meaning that the areas that are green are going to be the areas that you want to keep. Blue is going to be the computation, and then the red is, of course, the background. So once you've done that, you're going to hit the magic compute button. And because of the speed of the new Topaz Remask, it extremely quickly gives you your first mask, or actually it's showing you the mask result over here. I can also click on Keep, and this is now going to allow me to see my foreground element composited on the top of any color I want. If you want to change that color, I usually recommend that you start with a color that's not going to have too much color in it. Like right now, it's kind of bluish. So let's set that background color to be somewhat of a grayish kind of color. So we hit OK, and then we can see that. Now, considering what a quick job we did right now with it, this actually looks pretty good. But we do have a few problems. The problems are around here where the hair originally was, if I look at the image, against the green background. And as we look at the keep, we can see that some of that green is still there. So well, there's another wonderful new feature in Topaz Remask that's called foreground color recovery. With foreground color recovery, usually what I like to do is I like to crank it up all the way. So I'm going to put it up all the way to 100%. And most of the time, by default, it will clean up a lot of this, color contamination that you had around the edges. Now, if you notice areas that it does not clean up, that's easy. Just click on your blue brush, make it a little bit bigger, and just kind of go over those areas that are giving you a problem. Okay, nice big blue brush stroke, just like this. And now when it recalculates, you'll see that it will actually do a great job of cleaning some of that up. If you ever notice that there's areas that are just a little too difficult, the other thing I like to do is I'll switch over to the TriMap. And by the way, as I'm doing this, I'm using a lot of our keyboard shortcuts. Like, for example, changing between image, TriMap, mask, keep, and cut is simply the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buttons that are across the top of your keyboard. So just because speed is very important as you're masking, and learning the keyboard shortcuts in Remask really, really goes a long way. All right. So right now I'm just going to trim away some of these things that are around the edges that we didn't need. Like over here, I see a little bit of a green contamination, so I'll draw some in there. And right now, essentially, the only thing you want to do is just kind of go around the edges, and every time you see something that needs to be cleaned up, sometimes you'll grab the blue brush and brush over it, and this forces Remask to re-evaluate that area. There we go. Just keep going around and clicking on anything that might have some of that green contamination in it. Well, that's pretty good. Let's try a little bit more right here. Okay. Now, sometimes as I work on a mask, what I'll also do is switch over to the actual mask view. And by doing that, if there is any area that I might have missed when I was looking at the actual keep area, like for example right here, I noticed there's a little bit of a problem with the background showing through. So I'm just going to switch over to my background brush and click on it, and immediately that cleans it up. Here on one side of the image, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to what we call our dual view. And with the dual view, I can look on the original image, and I can see that this is actually supposed to be solid on our image of the girl. And over here, we see it's a little transparent. So by switching over to the solid brush, I click on that, and immediately, again, it's going to clean that all up. Sometimes I'll even look at this at the keep view, so it'll help me do that too. All right. Just kind of going around here, selecting any area that might have that problem. Okay, and we'll look at the mask over here. Oh, we got a little bit of a problem right there, so just kind of click on that. It will solidify her collar. All right, looks great. Let me switch back over to our single view. I'll Command 0, or I can also do a 1-to-1 on the screen, so it just fits on the screen like this. And we look at our final keep. And that looks actually really, really good. So at this point, if you're satisfied with it, you know what? There's one more thing that I noticed over here that I want to fix. Okay. Sometimes when you are masking hair, you're going to notice this little kind of like ghosting or webbing that happens. It's really easy. Every time you see that, switch over to your background brush and just kind of click right into the area that you're seeing any of that crazy webbing happening, and immediately it will smooth it all out. There's one other area that I want to call attention to, and that is sometimes when you're masking, if we look at this area right here, and we look at the keep, you'll notice that in the original there is this one little strand of hair that's there, whereas on our masked result we don't have that. First thing I like to always make sure of is that in my actual TriMap, I want to make sure that that's actually been included in the blue area, because you got to remember that blue is the area that the computer is going to compute. So first I make sure that that's actually been drawn in there. After I do that, I still see some of it is coming through, but still there is a little bit of a problem where that edge, right, the tip of that hair is not visible here in our mask. Now to be able to get these really subtle details, which are great for veils or smoke or any kind of semi-transparencies, we have another new feature in Topaz Remask 3 that's called Dual color selection. Here's the way it works. First, you click on the dual color selection brush, and you'll notice that your cursor is going to change to a green eyedropper. Now, Topaz Remask wants for you to sample the solid version of the color that you're trying to mask out. Now, in this case, we have this one little strand of hair. Now, the solid version of that hair is this color right here. Now, you notice that I'm not clicking on the transparency area right here. I'm actually clicking on the color that represents a solid version of the hair. Next thing I want to do is click on the background that's right around that hair. Just click on that. So now it knows these two colors, and in fact, it has placed those two colors right there. It's changed to a brush, so now just brush over the area that you want to be able to mask out, and now watch what happens. Immediately, that strand of hair that we couldn't get in our previous version has now appeared here on our mask as well. So it's a pretty straightforward process. Essentially, again, all you do is just click on, like for example, here I see another strand of hair that I don't have there. So I click on a version of the color that's solid, click on the background, like in this case right here, kind of brush over that area like that, and immediately that little strand of hair comes in there too. It's just a very straightforward process, and it's great for, like I said, anything that's semi-transparent. So now I think we're done with our mask. I'll zoom out all the way and take a look at our keep, and we got all these little details in there. So it's time to hit the OK button. Ta-da! So here's our final composite. I'll go ahead and zoom in on it just so you can see what's going on. And because she is now a cutout, as you know, you can place her on any kind of a background that you like. Okay? So that's the first example of where we're doing something that involves hair. Then as compositing becomes more and more difficult, there are a lot of challenges that you're going to be confronted with. And one of the challenges I'm going to highlight for you right now is trees. Trees are pretty difficult. So let me find a good example of a tree that I like to use, which is this one right here. There we go. Now, in this case, we're not going to bring in a background just because all I want to show you is how I would mask the tree out of the background, so I've just simply loaded only one image. Immediately after I load the image, I double-click on my layer in the background, and I hit OK, and that's going to unlock that background layer for me. And also, if I know I'm going to be masking the tree, oftentimes I'll just crop the area I want to mask. So let's go ahead and do a real quick crop right around the tree here by using the crop tool. I'll hit Enter. So now we just got the tree. Okay, time to jump into Remask. Under Filter, as before, pull down to Topaz Labs, Topaz Remask 3. Okay, now we're going to do a very rough blue outline around the tree. So let's grab a thick brush. And I'm using a mouse right now, by the way, if you were wondering if I'm using a stylus or not, because a very high priority in the design of Remask was to allow you to just make these very rough brush strokes and get extremely intricate and detailed maps. Once you do the outline, this time we're going to fill in the inside actually with blue, which is kind of strange because normally I would fill the inside with green. But since the tree has got all the leaves and the details of the branches, we want actually the computer to calculate the entire area of the tree. Then we grab the red bucket fill and bucket fill the outside, which means obviously we don't want the outside. We want to cut that out. And then finally, at this point, normally what would happen is you would want to fill in some of the solid areas by grabbing your red brush. Okay, so I'm going to make my brush smaller. And again, I'm using the bracket keys as I do this. Now, if you had to go in there manually and draw these green lines through every one of those branches, that would be very time consuming. You know, it's just very difficult. So there is another new feature in Remask 3. It's called Single Color Selection. It's been designed specifically for this kind of a problem. And here's the way it works. First, click on the green Single Color Selection tool. Then you're going to select any of the colors that you want that you know represents actually the branches or the leaves of the tree. So just click on this one right here. I'm going to break my brush size really big, and in the new Remask, you can crank the brush size all the way up to 255. And now you just want to very roughly brush over the whole tree. And I'm going to do this again and again. As I just zoom in, I'll click on a color and brush. Now you notice what's happening is that every time I click on a color, it's using that color and also a tolerance of those colors to make that green selection, which is what we want to keep. I'm going to take my tolerances and bring it up to somewhere around 18, and I never really go above 20, because if I did go above 20, you would just get too many of those colors in there. So right now, all you're doing is just clicking on what you want and just kind of swiping over the entire tree. So I'll just do this a few times here for you, just so you get an idea what's going on. Let's click on that color over there and brush over that. And we'll do a few more of those just so we can get all these little colors taken into consideration. Okay. Looks pretty good. That's going to be for our foreground, or for the green parts of our composite. And then the same applies for being able to cut out the background. So now this time you're going to choose the single color selection for the background. Choose the color of the background and then just do the same thing. Just kind of click over the whole area. And again, my brush size is really big, which is nice, which means I can do a very, very big brush stroke across the entire background. And very quickly, that's helping me put red, which identifies what we don't want, right into those big background regions. Sometimes I'll even go here into the holes that are right in the middle there, and I'll click on that and just do a big sweep across there too. Okay, so now you notice that's just a little minimum amount of work. Around the tree trunk here as well, I'll grab the red brush. Let's make our brush smaller. Just kind of cut those out, and we don't want this area either here. And now it's time to hit the magic compute button. So let's hit compute and see what happens. Wow. So with very, very little effort, okay, you can see that what an amazing job just by default Remask has done on our tree. Now, usually at this step, as you remember from what I just did before, I'll take my foreground color recovery and I will crank that up all the way. So that's going to help me with any of the colors that might be bleeding in around the edges. And at this point, it's nothing more than just putting it into a dual screen mode. And over here, I'll take a look at the original image. Actually, let's do it this way. I'll put the image over here, and I'll put the heap over here. And I'm going to constantly go around the edges of the tree and see if there's any problems. And if there are, as before, we'll use our compute brush and just kind of force Remask to recompute that area. Okay, and that's basically all I'm going to do right now. See, for example, there's this one area over here that was in the original tree that we don't see over there. Well, that's easy. Grab your single color selection, just click on that color right there and give it a little hit, and immediately that's going to appear there as well. Okay, we got a little thing over here that we need, so again, I click on that, brush on it, and that's going to appear too. Same over here, click on it, brush, okay, and that area appears as well. So just kind of going around here doing that. We click and do a quick little brush, and that's going to appear. All right. So it looks like our tree is doing actually pretty well. And oh, let's get that one little area right here too. Let's grab that and do cut out, get that as well. I'll go back to my single screen mode. Go to the full screen here like that and take a look to see if everything looks nice. Check your mask channel, and the mask actually looks pretty good. And at this point, you can hit the OK button, and ta-da! So we masked the tree out of the background. So at this point, you can replace the background with whatever you like. So in this case, even if you were to add in a new layer and put that layer here into the background, and you can just fill that in with whatever you like. So let me just kind of fill that in with black, or I can fill it in with a white, and the mask looks beautiful. So that is both the basic version of using Remask along with a few advanced tips and tricks.
Thanks, Greg. That was great. A lot of information and great presentation of Remask. Appreciate it. We do have a few questions coming through. Okay, a great question coming in from Judy. When are you able to use the recovery slider, the foreground recovery slider, as it's grayed out a lot?
Okay, really, really great question. I'm so glad you asked that, because I've been meaning to include that in the webinars, and I have not been able to do so. Let me show you when you would use it. Let's just go ahead and bring in any of our examples in just to clarify that.
And this is a good example. I'm sorry to interrupt. This is a great example because we have a couple questions coming through before about the white line, kind of the highlight on her face on the left.
Oh, okay, okay.
So that might be
Well,
something.
all right. Well, we'll look at that too. Okay, perfect.
Okay.
All right. So now that we have that on there, first to address the first question, as we go into Topaz Remask 3, when you do your outline, okay, I'm going to do this outline really quick right now, just because I want to get to showing you what that looks like, and also show you how quickly normally I do outlines when I'm not talking. There it goes. Okay. Now, if you are looking at your mask in the mask channel, you're going to notice that down at the bottom over here where it says foreground color recovery, that's going to be ghosted. And that's because the effects of foreground color recovery are only visible when you're actually looking at your image itself. So when you look at the keep, you'll notice that that actually becomes active. If I go back to the image mode, it gets ghosted. Trimap is ghosted. Mask is ghosted. Under cut, it's ghosted. So the only time you ever get to see it is if you are looking at your keep. Okay, so make sure you're looking at your keep channel, and then at that point, that's when you can actually, crank up your foreground color recovery. So that's as far as that question goes. I hope that answers that for you.
Yes, definitely. And then I think
You're
that
talking about the white line, I was
yeah,
saying?
just the highlight on her face, and I think
The highlight on
actually
her
that
face?
was
Okay.
covered pretty well with the recovery.
Okay, okay, absolutely. Okay, like right now, for example, as we look along the side here, let's take a look at the original right now. And in the original, okay, you're noticing that she has a little bit of a white line that's there, and that's just coming from the lighting or whatever else that she had. And we want to be able to maintain that in our composite. Now we have cranked up the foreground color recovery, and I'm going to use my blue brush and just kind of go over that area again. Now, first, I noticed that it does a pretty okay job. And sometimes if I see that it's not doing such a good job, I'll look at my trimap, and I can see that in the trimap that area is really wide of blue. And considering how wide that blue area is, Remask is actually doing a remarkable job of masking that out. Even when I look at the mask itself, I can see that it's pretty good. But if you want to give Remask, a better clue as to what's going on, sometimes just being able to trim in from the outside to get closer and closer to that edge is really going to help things out. So let me actually do that while we're looking at our keep. So the same thing applies for the red. So I can just go around the edges over here, making sure that I trim in from those edges too. And it's going to help me bring back that white line there against the background. So I hope that answers the question as far as the thing is concerned, the little white border that we had around there.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question on the sliders down there. When would you use the mask hardness and mask strength sliders? And the rest of the desaturation as well.
Right. Another great question. I personally never touch mask hardness and mask strength. I am going to show you what it does, and then I will explain why they are there and what the uses are. So as you look at this mask right now, even though we didn't do all the cleanup, you can see that the highest priority of Remask is to capture all of the subtle transitions that are in that original image and to be able to maintain that in the mask. So if you, and that's with the defaults of the mask hardness being at 0. Now, if you're compositing or you're trying to mask out graphic elements, like let's say it's a graphic logo or text or things like that, sometimes that softness is not what you want. So by taking mask hardness and cranking that all the way up, you can see what's going on right now. We're taking all of that softness that's there. In fact, let me just crank it up to 100%, and we're replacing that with a very, very harsh or a hard cutout. So it's solidifying that mask. And again, these are cases where you don't want all of these little subtle details to be there. And maybe those details are noise or they're just anything else that is unnecessary. And the same thing applies for mask strength. Let me take mask hardness back down to 0. I'll zoom into an area that has these subtle transitions in it. And if I crank up mask strength, you see what's going on now is we're taking some of the areas that were the solid part of the mask, where the subject is, and we're essentially growing that out. Okay? So if we look at our keep, it's going to really bring in more and more and more of the original element into the composite. And again, these are intended for any kind of a graphic foreground element where you do want to play with those two sliders to bring the maximum sharpness or a hard cut for the thing you're trying to mask out. And then finally, ask the question that relates to desaturation. Desaturation is probably one of the best features in Topaz Remask when it comes to masking out veils. Right now, just to show it to you, I'm going to take desaturation and crank it all the way up. And I want you to look at that green area that's around the mask right there. Take a look at what it used to look like. As we go before, you can see how there's a green tint to it, right? It's subtle, but it's definitely there. I'll zoom in on it again just so you can see what that green tint looks like. But then if I take that desaturation and I crank it all the way up, look what happens. It converts that green tint now into a grayscale. Now, oftentimes when you are masking out a veil out of the background, veils are against usually greenish, which is grass and foliage in the background, and other times it's masked against like a blue sky kind of a thing. And so you don't want to have that element of green in there. And so by just applying desaturation, that's how it's going to get rid of that color contamination that's only around the edges. Because you notice that desaturation does not modify the saturation of the actual element itself. So I hope that answers the question regarding that.
Yes, I think it does. Thank you. I have a couple other questions here regarding just some content. I have quite a few requests for a wedding veil. If you could possibly show how that might be done.
Okay. Let's try a wedding veil. Okay. This is an example that I've used from the video that I have on YouTube. And the original image, this is what the original image used to look like, and we want to be able to composite her in front of the Monument Valley photo, so here's what happens after you use Topaz Remask. I'll take the original image and I'll make a copy of it, and I'll move it up above over here, and we'll get rid of the work that we had done before. As a matter of fact, I'll just go ahead and delete it, so I can't cheat. So once you got that image there, under Filter, as before, you're going to pull down to Topaz Remask. All right. Grab a nice thick blue brush and start, going around the edges. Now in this case, I'm going to make the brush actually really, really thick, and I'm also going to make sure that I not only, make the borders of her blue, I'm actually going to fill in this area right here with blue as well. And this is very important because we know that we want the computer to calculate the veil area, and that's why we want to make sure we fill in the veil with the blue. Then as we go around, just the same thing. On the other side, I'll make my brush a little bit bigger so I can get some of the transparencies of the veil that are on that side. Okay? And as always, fill in the background with red, and we'll ask Remask to do the mask. And you can see that, by default, actually Remask has done a pretty amazing job masking out the veil, because when you look at the mask here, you'll notice how the areas that are supposed to be transparent actually are trying to stay transparent, which is really incredible. But we do have a few problems. The problems are, first, that we can see the color from the original background is coming through into the mask. So this is where we're going to apply both foreground color recovery and a desaturation. So let's crank up foreground color recovery all the way. Okay, and that's, by the way, immediately helping that out a lot, and it's allowing the veil to be more white, and the background colors are beginning to drop out. And then also, let's take the desaturation and bring that up just a little bit. And you can see that now what's happening is that it's taking any of the color that might have been a part of that background, and it's dropping it out. Okay? But we're going to do this even a little bit further. We're going to really, really push this. So as I zoom in on here, let's take this edge over here that in the original we know is solid. In our composite isn't really coming out right. So I'm going to trim away some of the backgrounds of it first, just by using my red brush. I'll just make sure that I go right around that edge there, so that's going to help solidify that. Well, in this case, actually, it's not solidifying; it's making it even more transparent. In the tri-map, I could see that it's. I did, trim pretty close to it, but that's fine. Actually, trimming as close as you can always is a good thing, of course, right? Next, to be able to really get that in there, we'll use our dual color selection tool. So click on the dual color selection. You're going to sample the most solid part of that veil, which in this case looks like this area right here. Okay, click on that. Click on the background, so it's going to be right around this area right here. And we're going to go over that edge just like this. Okay, so now you can see immediately how that helps solidify that region there. And if there's any contamination that's coming around the edges, just click on your background brush and you can click away those problems here like this. Okay? All right. So as I go around right now, that's essentially what I'm looking for is every time I see any problems around the edges, I'm just going to either use my red brush or my blue brush, and it's going to help get rid of any of the color contamination that we might have there. Over here, for example, I'll use some of my blue brush. Here on the hair, originally, we had a few strands that were strangling around, so I'll use the blue brush to highlight that. Now, by the way, are you noticing how I'm using the blue brush actually on the image itself? And I can't see what I'm doing as I'm brushing, but the effect is taking place. In fact, you can see it here now. And then when I switch over to my keep, I can see if that's working out or not. And if I really wanted to have that little subtle detail in there, I can always switch over to my dual screen mode. Keep this on a keep. Here's going to be the original. And I want to just get that one little strand of hair that's sticking out. So as before, we can use our dual color selection tool. Select the black. Select the color of the background, which is going to be right here. And just lightly brush right over that area, just like that. So now you notice that one little strand of hair, we got that as well in the composite. All right. So let's just keep going around here and seeing what we got. This area here, let's solidify that or just have Remask recompute that there. Okay, now this is originally, in the original image, we could see how it was trying to be semi-transparent, and in our mask, it's doing actually a pretty good job. So let's do a few of those. Up this area over here, we'll try to do that. This area as well. If I want to trim off that up just a little bit, I'll use my background brush and trim that away. And the same for over here. I'm using the blue brush now over here to have it recompute. Okay. Desaturation looks like it's pretty working. Now, if I see some remnants of color over here, I'll go ahead and desaturate that even further. Okay. So at this point, as I look at my mask, it actually looks pretty good. And I also know that if I see any areas in here where I'm looking at some of the original pattern from the background coming through, I can always go back and use the dual color selection tool to help try to solidify that. But I already know that I'm going to be compositing her in front of, as you can see, Monument Valley. And so Monument Valley already has some details that are back there. Now, this is, by the way, our final composite. And as you pick this up and move it around, you can see that it's doing a great job. If you were to put her in front of this background here, where it's completely solid, I would be able to see some of the patterns that are there from the original coming through. But just always being aware of what you are compositing in front of can help you with that, so you don't have to waste a lot of time trying to make things absolutely perfect if they don't have to be. But if you did want to make it absolutely perfect, obviously Remask does give you the tools to be able to go in there and make sure you get all those little subtleties as well. So I hope that answers that question about wedding veils.
Yes, it does. Thank you. Oh, this is the one that's being requested for subjects that have very similar colors to their background. There's a few questions, but I know you have an image of that gentleman's white against white that I thought you might be able to show them.
Sure.
Okay.
Let's try that one out. Okay, this is an image that I showed earlier, which is, let's see, let's take a look at this one right here. There we go. Okay, and what I like about this image is that when you zoom into his shoulder, okay, you notice that it's essentially like white against white. You know, so in the visual effects world, which is my background, we call these things implied edges. Oftentimes it's like a shadow against shadow, meaning it's just like pretty much a black against black, where they're, you know, based on a computer looking at it, it's just a 0 against 0. And there's really nothing you could do about that. And Remask is not going to find an edge there because there is no edge there, and that's why it's called an implied edge, because the human mind actually knows there's an edge there, but you can't see it. Now, in this case, actually, believe it or not, there is some kind of an edge there, and I can see it kind of, there's a difference there. I just want to show you how powerful Remask is in being able to find that edge. So before we continue, let's double click on the background image. So it's going to unlock it. Go to Remask. And I'll zoom in and do that rough outline right around that edge. Now I'm not going to mask everything out because we're obviously just concerned about just this one little area right here. Okay, and we'll fill in the background with red, and we'll ask it to compute. Okay, now you can see that, again, by default, it has done a pretty good job with this cutout. But what I'm going to do now to show you how we can go even further is I'll switch over to the green brush, and I just start clicking around that edge. Okay, what I'm doing right now is I'm eating in on my trimap, okay, just like this. All right, as we look at doing a little dual screen here, okay, let's look at the original, and let's look at the heap over on this side. Okay, it's beginning to look better, and if I want to eat away at the background, same thing, I just choose red and click on some of the areas that need to get rid of that. Then finally, what always comes to the rescue is foreground color recovery. I'll crank that up. It's going to help me clean up that edge a little bit more as well. So that's essentially what I want to show you, is that even though you might think that in the original there was really nothing to help you there, or there was like practically no color differences, there is actually quite a bit of information, and there is enough of a difference that Remask is going to be able to see it. So I hope that answers that question.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right, and I think we'll go ahead and just end it there. Thank you guys for all of your questions. If you are looking to upgrade, if you have Remask and you are wanting to upgrade to 3.2, it is free, and you can find all of that information on our support page, which is topazlabs.com/support. It's in the it's in the FAQs, and you can just look there and you'll see what you need to upgrade. All right, thank you so much, Greg. This has been great.
Well, thank you.
Really appreciate it.
That was fun.
Take care. Hope to see you again.
Bye-bye, everybody.